6, 2025. Could we all please stand and salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Could the superintendent please call the rolls?
Mr. Austin, Ms. Chisholm.
Here.
Ms. Cormier, Mr. Lipson. Here. Mr. Morenin. Present. Ms. Wetzel, Ms. Crowley.
Present. Okay, we have a slightly shortened agenda due to the gravity of the issues that we'll be discussing tonight. So we're going to start with the consent agenda. Do I have any action?
Motion.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Same action on 3.5, Madam Chair?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Moving straight into reports and presentation of superintendent and staff. I will pass it over to Dr. Crowley for a discussion on redistricting and the presentation of updated maps.
Sure, thank you. So at this time, Priya, can you join us? Yeah. Tonight, we're obviously talking about redistricting as a priority item on the agenda. Our consultant is here to review some of the steps that we've taken to date. And then between myself, Mr. Lipset, Ms. Young, Ms. Ryan will go through the presentation. But the first few slides, is it Priya okay to call you Priya?
Yes, yes.
Is it, I'm going to have Priya walk through really the steps that we've gone through as a working group and as an advisory committee, and grateful to have you here. With that being said, we did have a meeting on Monday afternoon with the advisory, and that's this slide, but we just changed the date till tonight. So I'm going to advance to the next slide, and this is really your slides. So.
Yeah. Well, good evening, everybody. Just to introduce myself, I'm Priya Sankalia. I am the project manager on this redistricting project for Woburn. I am with the Sanborn Map Company, and we were hired by Woburn to do this study. What I hope to cover today is some of the things that we talked about on Monday with the advisory group, just who the stakeholders in this process are and what their roles are, what progress we've made so far, and looking at the timeline a little bit. Just a quick peek at the guiding principles that all of you came up with, and then go into the maps that we've developed, and and then we could go into discussion. So next slide. I put this slide together for Monday just to make sure everybody's on the same page as to who the stakeholders are, and I see it as really 5 groups. We as the consultants, Sanborn as the consultants, do the project management. So I am the senior project manager with the company, and I'm managing this project, and have done so with over a dozen towns in Massachusetts, doing this work for several communities. We go through the process, we analyze the data, we build options and scenarios along with the working committee. We develop the presentation. So what you're seeing today was put together partly by us and a little bit by the working group. And then we basically support, the larger working group and advisory committee to come up with a solution. The working group itself is a small group. It's of administrators and key people in the administration who we work with. We work with them to build the components and scenarios, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we work with the advisory committee to come up with viable options, and then making recommendations, and then communicating that to the larger school community. And then finally, the advisory committee is a larger group, which is who we take options to, which seem viable, and we discuss it with them. They are representatives of the school committee, principals, parent representatives, administrators, teachers across the board. We review and look at the scenarios with them, and then they, through the advisory group, we sort of support the recommendations. And then you, as a school committee, of course, are the decision-making entity. You develop the guiding principles that we used to come up with these maps, and you will be voting on the best option for the district. I apologize, I think we had to convert the PowerPoint into Google, so it's looking a little off, making me a little uncomfortable. And then finally, of course, the larger Woburn community, all of you, this is who you're doing the work for. And you have to maintain awareness, and that's your role. Keep abreast of what's going on, which the administration is providing you with. And I have emphasized to the superintendent and the working group and advisory committee that this can be successful only when it's transparent. So we've tried to be as transparent as possible through the entire process. Next slide. So just really quick, the timeline. In January, we kicked off this project. We gathered all the data. We did the background analysis. We used, January through March to do a lot of that, building the components, reviewing options, coming up with scenarios. And then now we're in this phase of bringing to you these initial maps, and then, potentially taking it forward to community forums as well. And then finally, of course, we'll incorporate all the feedback we get and then bring it to you to vote. Next slide. So as far as the progress, like I said, we've done the processing, analyzing the data. We set up the workflows. We geocoded the student locations. We used your enrollment data to geocode locations so we knew where the students are. We had a kickoff meeting. We collaborated with the working group to identify components. And I don't have that slide here with me, but I think it'll be shared. And you've seen the components. They're basically, little building blocks of the entire town, which are then used to come up with the districts. And you build various scenarios using those components as building blocks. And you sort of create as many components as possible across the town to give you more flexibility. That doesn't mean you'll use that all of them will be affected, but at least you have them available to you. We did a lot of work. We came up with 13 options, and we evaluated them against the guiding principles of those. We made 29 scenarios as well. So like an option is a permutation of, which school would be hosting what will happen to it, and the scenario is the different, building the districts based on that option. And then we held three advisory committee meetings. This was done before the Monday meeting, so 3 meetings. We shared the viable scenarios with them. We discussed in depth, and today we're bringing some of those options to you.
And so
this is a list of the advisory committee. The first few names at the top were part of the working group, and then it's a pretty diverse and representative group, the advisory committee of the town. And I think, I will say personally, I really appreciated everybody's input. It was a very well put together group, and everybody was involved. I think that's really key, that they were engaged and involved, and it's been a great process. So appreciate all the help. Just a real quick listing of the guiding principles. I know that we had an iteration of this, and the idea was that you come up with something that you can actually use to evaluate these scenarios against. So, as you can imagine, these guiding principles will work against each other. So, if you are pursuing class size equity, potentially you might be jeopardizing neighborhood schools. So you kind of have to see, how they all stack up against every scenario. And that's what we've done. We've attempted that. And so, I think these are all really great guiding principles. Equity in terms of class sizes and demographics, maintaining sub-separate programs, really important for Woburn. In the current buildings, proximity of course, neighborhood schools is really key. And also as little disruption as possible. So, that's the tricky part. Next one.
I'm just going to go back to this slide for a second to publicly thank all the community advisory committee members, a lot of parents came. We did have a meeting, as I alluded to, on Monday afternoon, and it was a robust conversation, and many of the people here tonight were active participants, and I'm grateful for their time and insight into the process, because it matters to hear from parents at each school. And so I know that the parents are taking this very seriously. There's time and energy that gets put into it, and I wanted just to publicly thank the parents. There's also some administrators here on the list, building principals. Christy Nickerson is the WTA co-president, so she's been part of this conversation. Again, just grateful to have as many stakeholders around the table as we go through this process as possible. So I just wanted to say that. Do you want to talk about the guiding principles at all? Or you,
Only that, you know.
Mr. Lipson?
Thank you. These were the results of, really at this point, a couple of years of discussion. We put together original guiding principles, or a list of them last year, and refined them, ranked them this year. That's a difficult task, but one that I think, the committee, we really, I think, had a good conversation about what all of these really mean, what our priorities are, and how they might interact, or, as Priya said, sometimes conflict, and how we can use those to prioritize. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lipson.
This is just a slide with the components, and we have an interactive map that can, you can go into looking at what these are. This will all be shared with everybody. And as you can see, just in this map, it's a screenshot of the map, but we have tried to make components all over town, because some components actually don't have any students at all, but just to make it, contiguous, we've created them. And the R1s, the anything which has a 1 is where the school is. So that's the primary component, which is what everything will get attached to. So just to give you a sense of what the map looks like. Some of you might not even have looked at the map of the town, so it's really insightful.
And if I said this at the advisory, and you just alluded to it, but as an example, component M14, the blue one towards the bottom, that's the Horn Pond area. And while it looks like it's a big section, and because it is geographically, there's just not many students that get pulled out of certain areas. So, again, just to be clear, because the colors, it gives you a context. Like, geez, that must be a huge area, and some of the components are bigger than others. But it's where kids live too that matters.
I will be passing the presentation off to Courtney, but meanwhile, this is just this is how we present all the data. This is a map of all the students in Woburn. All those dots are the students, and where they are located, you can see where the concentration is, and they're coded by the color of the district that they go to. You'll see some students that are from a different district, in that area, and those are essentially either special ed students going to a different district. And you see a breakdown of all the students by grade, what the capacity of each school is and what % capacity we're at right now. And while, that's one number, Courtney will explain more about that. The things to look at is actually the class sizes and what the average classroom size is. And also you have some insight into the demographics in each school, who the multilingual learners are, what the special ed population is, and what the low-income population is. And at the bottom, we kind of spell out, where the special programs are, the sub-separate programs, and then, we've kind of looked at where those would be housed depending on the option of the scenario. Okay.
Thank you, Priya.
I'll stick around, or you want?
Sure.
Okay.
You're always welcome to stay.
Yeah.
All right, I certainly, I'm going to start, but Matt and Maureen can hop in at any time. So actually, if you want to go back one. So one of the kind of, our hope is to just provide a lot of clarification. I think there's been a lot of different questions, so some of it might seem repetitive, but the hope is also to just kind of answer some of the questions now. So one of the things that's been part of the conversation is related to capacity percentages, and a piece of this has been that we're really talking about kind of two different capacity. One being kind of how many students are in the building versus how many students could be in the building, as well as versus kind of space capacity. And really what we find is that in some buildings we're having trouble because we have too many students, but in other buildings the number of students might look like the percentage is down, but really what we're looking at is we don't have any rooms left to use, right? And so on this sheet and on all of the sheets when you're looking at the different maps, the capacity percent here is based off of the number of classrooms that we have in the building by the number of possible students we could have based off those number of rooms. So the Hurled-Wyman is one example that we give, which shows that the Hurled-Wyman percentage is at 77%. That's based off of 21 general education classrooms. The Hurled-Wyman was not designed for 21 elementary classrooms. So separate of this, I would provide it in your folder, and I say because this document is helpful for some and confusing, it makes it more confusing. So when it's helpful, use it. When it's confusing, don't. But you'll look at, this is looking at based off of space capacity. So if you look at the first percentage, if you're going off the number of classrooms that we have available for general education classrooms at the Hurled-Wyman, it's 18, and we're using 21. So our space capacity is at 116%. And so just kind of giving that there's kind of two different percentages. And so what you have that goes along with each of the options is the space percentage, and then what's on the actual slide deck is the capacity based off of the student percentage. So if we keep going, what we discussed, I don't need this one, I'm good. So what we discussed at the advisory committee meeting 2 days, Monday, I'm like, is it yesterday or Monday? On Monday. Is that we're really looking at kind of two options. And so we have maps within these options. We'll kind of walk through them, but really before we're kind of diving into the maps themselves, the kind of first conversation is really which of the two options are we looking at. And so option one is based off of the conversation that we had at our kind of guiding principal meeting, which was related to if we weren't to be finding an alternative space for ECP for the upcoming school year, what was the pressure release options that we could. So what could we do to move some components for September so that we could be opening up some of our buildings that are overcrowded to feel a little bit better, right? And so the conversation around that was, well, we need to have an end map so that we make sure that when we move students, that we're moving students towards where we're going so that we don't risk moving students twice. And so option one here was that those maps that we had talked about, which was those end maps. And so before we can really look at pressure points, we're really looking at what are we deciding is the end map. And that's option one. And we'll talk kind of about some light pros and cons. Option two is going and looking at new lines, which is that if we were to keep the ECP split between the two current buildings, which is the Reeves and the Shamrock, we would draw kind of brand new lines to make it so that we could fit the ECP as well as not have overcrowding on the general education side, as well as within the rest of the community. And so the two scenarios under option two are really kind of the new lines. Just want to make sure. I've tried to make it as condensed as possible, and so I'm just checking that it makes sense. All right. So if we go to the next page, by no means is this a comprehensive list. This is just from the conversations that we had yesterday, as well as kind of our general understanding of these two options, kind of just what are the pros and cons of looking at both. And what we talk a lot about is that it's a very complex, we're dealing with kind of a complex problem, and so the complexities of the two options are real. So option one, which is looking at the long-term map, provides us with long-term planning and looking towards potential building. The option one provides us with a gradual response that's able to respond to the community growth as it comes for kind of a longer plan. What's the negatives of this is that, or the cons, is that the space issues for the coming September will absolutely feel better, but they will not feel completely resolved. And so we will still be using kind of some rooms across the community that aren't necessarily designed to be general education classrooms, but it will feel better than it does right now. The second part is kind of that the year-to-year part about it is difficult, because what we're looking at is potentially each year needing to have a process in place in which we're looking at what does the crowding look like across the community, and do we need to move more components for the upcoming school year? And for however long that happens, it could be happening year to year, right? And so that unknown can be hard. And then the last part about it is that because we will be having the ECP kind of growth at the Reeves, it will make it so that we might have to be looking at what would we do if it continues to get overcrowded, and will we need to do map maintenance over time as a response. In terms of redistricting with ECP, with the programs existing in their current buildings, including the ECP staying split and the drawing of the new lines, the pros to this is that, you know, seemingly for September, we would be walking into buildings that feel a lot better. The students would be, you know, more evenly distributed. It would be a more equitable distribution, and it would create space for ECP to be growing within the Reeves. This is difficult because one, it's a large number of students moving in for September. It definitely, when you're looking at the two, it's a bigger movement. As well as when there would be a new building project, and when the ECP were to move out of the Reeves, that would be releasing 12 rooms, which would seemingly mean that these lines that we draw in option 2 would absolutely all be redrawn once you were to move the ECP. Again, I'm not necessarily. They both have things that are good, and both have things that make it difficult.
And just, Maureen, in a little bit, we'll talk about the ECP program, but for clarification, we currently have 13 ECP classrooms, 9 at the Reeves and 4 at the Shamrock, and that number has grown, and
it will be 10 for September.
And it will be 10 in September.
Yeah.
And just for context, just a few years ago, the Reeves had only one classroom that was an ECP classroom. And we moved as the RISE program grew from the Shamrock to the Reeves about 5 years ago. So it's been an ongoing issue that we've addressed, and the Reeves has been great because they've been welcoming. The ECP program is part of the Reeves. It is part of the Shamrock, and you know, again, want to say that because they are our youngest, most vulnerable learners, and they're great to have in our buildings. But there has been a growth, and again, Maureen will speak to it in a little bit, but just for context, as for the number of current rooms and what we're looking at for September.
So when looking at option 1, what you have, it kind of are next to each other. And you also have them in larger. That was the additional document that I provided, is looking at the end maps for the 3 scenarios. And so what we're looking at is, if we're going under option 1, is making the decision of kind of what is the end map. And then it would be, once we select the end map, it would be what is the decisions of the components to move for next year. There are many different options for that. And so what I think, Andrew, you outlined it a little bit, what my understanding would be is that once the end map was decided, you would then be provided all the different scenarios that you could do as the pressure release for next September that is based off of that decided map. But each of the 3 maps, that pressure point release would look different. And so instead of looking at all of them for each, it would be based off of the one that you selected. And so scenario 1 map, when looking at options to be keeping the RISE 2 program at the Harold Wyman, This was the kind of ideal scenario one, was the ideal map amongst the advisory committee. There was a kind of a multitude of different ones that were looked at, and this was the one that the group felt like did kind of met the guiding principles the best. From that meeting, it was asked that we looked at ways to keep the Shamrock fully intact with all of those S's. You'll see the S2 and the 3, as well as take on G10. And so scenario 2, you'll see the adjustment was made to look at another option in which we could draw the map with that option. And then the third scenario was based off of the advisory committee's request to be building a map option in which we were pushing more students towards North Woburn in the event that we were looking at a new school. So you'll see that L6 had been in the Hurled-Wyman, and then it went back into the Linscott on scenario 3, as well as kept the request at looking at the Shamrock. So those are really the three differences between the three maps in front of you. And so on the next page, this is an example of what it could potentially look like to do pressure relief based off of one of the end maps. So for example, if scenario 1 map is the selected map in this option, that this would be one option that you could consider, and that's why I want to be really conscientious that like this is not what you would definitely do. This is one option you could consider in the middle of what you would do for September for pressure release based off of the end map. I would imagine that the next step would be, once you chose the end map, that you would look at many different versions of that kind of middle panel to make a decision. This is not the only way, one way. All right. And so then with option 2, which hopefully we should now see green, option 2, which is looking at entirely new lines, based off of where current programming in as a September 2025 open, you can see obviously this is a very big difference. And so the difference between these two maps is so there's actually a few of them. So one of them was to be bringing a few more students back into the Hurled-Wyman. So in option 1, there was still a good amount of room left, and while we were certainly kind of bringing the number down, it seemed like we could bring a few more students in. And then
Those M.
Yes,
M
we
by
had a
Goodyear.
few more students move back into the Malcolm White from the Goodyear. The Goodyear is one of those funny schools where it's like that tipping point's really thin, and so we were looking for options in which we could be kind of building it as the 18 that it can be, but if ways we could make sure that it just really didn't go over, and so we looked for the ability to move just a few more students out of the Goodyear on that line of the Shamrock. I think just that one component. And so those are the two maps there. And I don't know if we want to do this part next, or do we want to talk about maps?
You want to do this and then we'll do questions after?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm going to just touch on a few things for the early childhood program. It's only one slide after our picture. Actually, can we go back to the picture for a minute? I always like to remind people that these are our babies. These are our kiddos that are entering the Woburn Public Schools. These are the kids that need the most intensive services because this is their window. And I like to point that out. I welcome people to visit and tour the early childhood program, but these are our kiddos. Okay. So what I wanted to cover on this is that the early childhood program, or our pre-K students, this is a special education program required by law. This is 603.CMR 28.07. That is the state regulation right here. It is a law. This is not childcare. This is not optional. This is a special education legally required program. Our children come from early intervention, and they come often with very intensive needs. These are usually children that have been picked up sometime between birth and the ages of 3 when they are eligible for the public school system. They may have been born with a genetic issue. They may be a child that didn't learn to talk It could be a child with mobility issues. Sometimes we have kiddos that come in with trachs. These are kids that often come with very intensive needs from early intervention. Sometimes they weren't picked up by early intervention and they come with intensive needs too. Programming is required to be in place, ready to roll on the day of the child's 3rd birthday. We don't get to say, we're not ready for you, come back in a few weeks. It must be in place. And so what happens is over the school year, unlike other grades, as children turn 3, the preschool classrooms must have the spot and the space and the providers ready to service these children. Services by law must be unique to the child, an individual education program. And under IDEA, which is the federal law, and also under the state laws, the services must be unique to the child. We can't just say this child's only going to come 2 days a week because that's what we have. We must have services that meet the needs of the child, and that is the law. Services range from drive-in services, which are children that need a lower amount of service. They may need speech a couple of days a week, or maybe they need some OT, occupational therapy. And then on the higher end, we have many children that require substantially separate programs, which means they cannot be educated and serviced with typical peers. Their needs can only be met in a substantially separate special education classroom. We can't legally run only a 2-day program. The programs must meet the disability needs of the children according to state and federal law. Now, the law requires that children are educated in the least restrictive environment. And so, for many children, that means an integrated preschool classroom where they have typical peers. And that sometimes is where you might see a 2-day model in some communities. So, for example, we may have special education students that come 4 days a week, but their typical peers might come Tuesday, Thursday. The typical peer ratio, and currently we have 7 integrated classrooms. By law, we can have 7 students with a disability, and then we are required to have 8 typical peers. That's the regulation. We are currently out of compliance because we do not have enough typical peers. We are under a corrective action to recruit typical peers to come to our program. The school committee has been very accommodating and granting at-risk spots for families in need to try to help us get in compliance with this. But it is challenging to recruit typical peers that will come for an integrated model when the sessions are only 2 hours and change. But we have many students that need an integrated classroom. And there may be a morning session or there would be an afternoon session, and the peers would come to one or the other. In our 6 substantially separate classrooms, those children come every day. They come until 1 o'clock. And they may be students that are on the autism spectrum that maybe need 20 hours of applied behavioral analysis. It depends on the needs of the students. The questions that have come up ask things like, is a playground legally required? And we are legally required to meet the needs of the children. So many children at that age come in with motor difficulties. And when we're working with our physical therapists and our occupational therapists, we need the correct equipment that it meets the safety standards for children of this age. I would also point out that we are required to have typical peers. This is where we are struggling. And if you have a typical child, you're probably not going to be overly invested in enrolling your typical child in a preschool program that doesn't have a playground. So is a playground legally required? Yes and no. We must be in compliance. And so I think there's been a lot of confusion over that. Part of what happens with your children coming in is we don't actually know who's coming in. We can look at the population of children in the city and we can see how many are maybe in early intervention, but the reality is we are obligated by child find to find these kids and be ready to service them on their 3rd birthday. Now, this year, I will tell you that as of about 3 days ago, we currently have 245 students in the early childhood program. So we're at 245. Any child that turns 3 and qualifies from now through the end of this school year will add to that number. Also, any child that qualifies and goes into the least restrictive setting that may be an integrated classroom will also require by law a typical peer, or we will remain out of compliance. Currently, now in March, we're at 245. Last year, we finished the school year at 261. We are trending to be considerably higher than where we were last year. At this time, 30 of our students are what we call drive-in students that just come for services. We have 104 peers and we have 111 special education students. But again, I would remind people that we are still not meeting the legal requirements for typical peers, and the admission is what we call rolling because children are having birthdays and any child turning 3 will be joining our program. So that's a little bit of just sort of a preview on what the early childhood program entails and why so many of these space issues come into play.
So this was from Monday's deck, but the advisory committee met Monday afternoon, as I said. School committee meeting is right now. We will be talking probably about scheduling an additional meeting with the school committee and then having public forums and public surveys as part of this process. And so that concludes the slide deck for this segment.
Thank you, Dr. Crowley. So I'm anticipating that the committee will not want to vote on the 2 options, meaning the 2 phased or not phased options tonight, given that there's only 4 members here. So first set of business, would the committee like to schedule a meeting next week? I was thinking April 1st. I'll throw that out there to see if members are available on April 1st for a special meeting on the vote for the map concerning redistricting with the Reeves Shamrock Scenario 1 or that option or the phased options. April 1st.
I'm available.
That works for me.
Because Jesse should be back.
Michael is
When is
looking
the
at
next
his.
advisory committee meeting?
We don't have one scheduled at the moment.
April Fool's Tuesday.
Yep.
I mean, I'm free, I don't know what it's going to accomplish, but if that's what the wish of the committee is, I'm available that evening.
If I can,
We'll be voting.
Yeah.
We're going to vote, so there's 2 options
Yeah.
on which direction we're going to go in. If we're going to be looking at a phased-in approach to redistricting or more a permanent redistricting. That's what we'll be voting on. Okay. So, Mr. Lipset, did you want to add anything?
no, I was just going to make a motion that we have a special meeting for April 1st at 7 p.m. in this room.
Okay.
Second.
Do I have a second? Okay, any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes 4-0. Now, members, would you like to hear from the public first, or would you like to ask the administration questions about the map?
Let's hear from the public.
Okay, so are we?
I think if I could,
Of course.
this is a lot of information to present the public with before
Sure.
comment, and I think it's worth just sort of going over and making it as clear as possible what we are looking at, what we are going to be voting on the first, just to make sure that there are no, that there's no confusion in the room on that before we hear from the public and move forward on it. So if I could just have you go back to the two options.
Mr. Lipset, hold on, let me just check with Ms. Chisholm. Ms. Chisholm, are you okay with having a discussion first to clarify some of the information?
We
before-
can clarify, but I just want them to have an opportunity so
Absolutely.
that we can discuss it
Okay.
after they speak too.
All right, thank you, Ms. Chisholm. So why don't you go ahead and make, we'll do some clarification questions so that the public know what they're commenting on. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Lipset.
Okay, so, and, you know, this is something that, you know, Ms. Young, Dr. Crowley, members of the advisory committee who were in the room on Monday, we spent a long time trying to understand exactly what this was. So I don't want to presume that people in the audience are able to immediately jump on board with that, as we had, you know, a couple of hours with this to really understand what the process was. As both Courtney and Priya said, this is a result of the discussion that we had a couple of meetings ago, maybe one meeting ago, where we were talking about the need to look at a final map, but also, if we weren't able to have additional space for an ECP as of September, create pressure point maps. So what we have here are basically two paths forward. Each of them presents other options. In some ways, sort of like a choose your own adventure, but we're all going to choose one or the other. Option one is that we are going to look at maps that are a long-term solution. When we are able to develop additional space for either for the ECP separately or as part of a new building project with ECP attached, that is the map that we would be moving toward. In order to do that, we wouldn't be able to do it all at once right now because we don't have that separate space. So we do have capacity issues, we do have space issues that we've outlined. What we would need to do is begin a phased process where we move in steps from where we are now to where we anticipate going. So what we would have is, if the committee chose option one, we would then choose between 3 different endpoint maps after that fact, right? So our first vote would be, are we doing a phased in or are we doing everything right now? Right? If we choose either one, we will then have to choose between different scenarios within that option. Right? Those are the things that would go before the public in a public forum. If we chose option one, the phased in approach, what we would be voting on after public input would be the final map, where we are going, right? When we have new space, which of these maps would we like to adopt as our goal? If we do that, we would also then be looking at different options to get us there. This would involve some redistricting for September, and then targeted strategic redistricting to get us to that final point, with the understanding that everyone who would be moving at some point would already know, based on the final map that we adopt, that at some point over the next X number of years, their district would be redistricted, okay, their component. So initially, we might have a few different components moving as of September. There might be more 2 years from then, and then another set 2 years from then, before we get to a place where we have a final map, right? That's option one. Option two is, we don't think about where, you know, additional space down the line. We don't think about building projects. We try to address all of the needs as best we can right now for September. So those are the two options before us. And then we could just go to the next slide, the pros and cons. Right. So just to reiterate the pros and cons here, right? We have, for option one, for the phased redistrict, where we would be doing small component moves regularly until we have additional space. That gives us that long-term ability. We understand where we're going. It is gradual, so we are not moving a large number of people at once, but over some period of time. And it allows us to be a little flexible because, again, we don't know where our growth is going to occur or how rapidly. For option two, the pros give us more equity right off the bat. It gives us a little space for the ECP to grow. It addresses most of our needs right away. But, and Ms. Young, correct me if I'm wrong, there is more potential that we would have to do a larger redistrict again in the more immediate future with option 2. It's hard to say for sure.
I have no crystal ball.
Okay, right. And that's why I say it's more likely. But
I think that the only, again, I'm trying to speak in certainties. The only certain is that when you were to be moving the ECP out of the Reeves at the end of option 2, you would absolutely need to be redistricting more students in, because you would be releasing at that point like 12 classrooms. I think that with both, there's a level of uncertainty. I think it's hard to know. Yeah.
So that's, I just wanted to make sure that was as clear as we could make it for everyone in the audience, what the two things that we are deciding between here are. So are we deciding between, we are planning long-term towards a new building and towards ECP space, and then moving strategically with small component redistricts until we get there? Or are we attempting to solve all of our problems, or at least as many as we can, in the immediate term, with the possibility of, when we have additional space or when things shift, another full redistrict down the line? Those are the two options that we are discussing. The vote that we are scheduling for Tuesday the 1st will be between these two options only. We would not be adopting a map on the 1st. We are just deciding which set of maps we would present to the public, we would gather feedback on, we would deliberate on, and we would vote on. Okay? So I just wanted to make sure we can make that as clear as we can right now.
May I add something?
Of course you can. Thank you, Priya.
One thing, Andrew, if you don't mind talking about, is what transpired on Monday as far as what everybody felt. And then the other thing I'd also like to add is we will be potentially, not potentially, we will be giving the advisory committee, the working group, a lot more information now that we have whittled down to, like, once we've picked one of these options, we'll be able to focus on that option and, things like how many students are impacted, how much is transportation impacted. So you have a few more criteria you have a little more data to evaluate your guiding principles against. So that's another piece. So I feel like, yes, we can get the public's input right now, but I feel like they don't have as much information. And there's going to be a lot of questions which you might not have answers to. I mean, you're absolutely welcome to involve them, but it's just that it's a little premature right now, because we do have to still work on the maps and get them good information that they can weigh in on. That's all I'll say. Sorry. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. And so Priya reminds me to summarize a little bit more in depth the feedback from the advisory committee on this decision. At the end of the presentation, and after people had asked a variety of, I think, really, really good questions that thought about the short term, the long term, the details, the big picture, I did ask the members of the advisory committee to not make necessarily a distinct recommendation, but at least to sort of voice a broad preference between option 1 and option 2. How I would characterize the response was that a very clear majority of the members of the advisory committee preferred option 1. And that was due in large part to a few different factors. The fact that it was a gradual move, the fact that it had a long-term plan in mind, and I believe that there was some discussion over a feeling that the class size numbers and other components, and it varied between the different scenarios, but that those better represented some of our guiding principles. There were some people who preferred option 2 as well, and especially with the idea that it provided the community with a more firm, immediate response. There were also questions about, as Priya said, we're going to get more information about different aspects of this once we choose an option, but about the varying costs between the different options and between the different scenarios. So that was the feedback that I received in that meeting. If there are members of the advisory committee who are going to provide public comment a little bit later who would like to clarify any of that or add any pieces of that discussion, I would certainly welcome that as well.
Okay, so the committee is in the first part of a decision tree, and just so we're using the same vernacular, The two things that we are going to decide on April 1st is option 1 or option 2. And those are basically going to lead into further decision-making with a lot more information that stems from that core first decision of option 1 or option 2.
And I would say, to answer Mr. Mulrennan's question, that an advisory committee meeting would happen shortly after the decision of 1
Right.
or 2.
And then the parent advisory committee will give feedback on the option 1 or option 2.
On the maps.
On the
To bring
maps
back-
created
To bring the
therein.
maps back to you guys.
Yes, okay. So if that's clear, I will open it up to public participation, and I will accept a motion to suspend the rules on the 3-minute limit.
So moved.
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion on suspending the rules on the 3-minute limit on public comment? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes. So is there anyone that would like to speak to the committee on this matter, or any matter? Please come. Oh, and Priya.
You're all set.
Priya, you don't have to speak.
You don't have
Thank
to
you.
sit.
Thank you,
Yes,
Priya.
you can take a seat.
I'm just going to give just a quick little thing. This is public comment. You are being recorded. The comments, we would suggest, should be under the jurisdiction of the school committee, and please refrain from any direct text on any staff member of the public schools. And there is, for this particular public comment session, there is not a 3-minute limit on public comment.
Okay. Name and address? Is that how this works?
please.
Okay. Julia Edmonds, 1 Linda Street.
Hi, Julia.
Hi. First off, thank you all for your time, countless hours, energy that you have been pouring into this for years. We appreciate it. It's a lot of time and effort. I don't feel excited about the two options that I'm seeing, because I think, looking back to the city council meeting, it seemed like without the modulars, we were going to see an increase in class size. And I'm an elementary school teacher, so I know that small class sizes are really important, stronger teacher-student relationships, better academic outcomes. And so I just feel worried about both options leading to most kids ending up in classes that are fuller. So I'm just wondering, it seems like what we need is a new school building. And so I'm wondering, I'm sort of disappointed that we're not yet on the MSBA list. We know we need a North Woburn Elementary School, a middle school, an ACP, and we're looking at 5 to 7 years. So it's not going to happen in time for my kids. I'm just wondering, what is the plan to get on that list as soon as possible so that that ball is rolling? And then I just wanted to bring up the modulars again, because I know in the meeting, it seemed like they were the best option presented from the committee. And I didn't hear the city council say no. I heard them ask for more information at that meeting. And so I'm wondering, can we work with the city council to provide them with this? Can we get some more information to sell it to everyone, if that is really a better result than doing this redistrict? That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the school committee and speak? Hi, nice to see you.
Hi, thank you. My name is Allison Van Deventer, and I live at 8 Sherman Place, and I'm the parent of 2 children at the Malcolm White, a 4th grader and a 1st grader, and we're in component M6, in case if anyone is curious. So we are in a neighborhood that may get redistricted to the Shamrock or the Goodyear in the various options that we've seen. And this would be a sad transition for us, but we would deal with it. And today I'm not here to talk about the particular impact that this would have on my family. Instead, I want to talk a bit about how we got here, according to my understanding, for the benefit of all the people listening, and also to explain how I've arrived at my advocacy for option 1 of the options that are before us. So first, I just want to say, I've said this before at the meeting with our school rep, but I want to say it again. It's important for everyone in the community to understand that redistricting is going to happen. So we're not debating whether to redistrict at this point. The only questions on the table are when and how. And my next point is the when has already been answered. We need to redistrict this year because we're at a crisis point now. It didn't happen last year, and so this year we need to do something. Third, it's been quite thoroughly established in my understanding that in order for redistricting to solve the problems in any kind of a lasting way, we need more space for the ECP. And so this matter has been studied extensively by the school committee. It's well documented in the minutes on the website. I spent some time last night reading through all of them, and it's been confirmed by 2 consulting firms right now. Other people, like our school rep, Alex Tisdale, have explained the reasons well, and so I'm not going to go into them here. I just want to emphasize that finding more space for the ECP is a necessity at some point. And all of the obvious places to put the ECP in the near term have been explored by the school committee and found to be unworkable for various good reasons. Given these constraints, so we need to redistrict, we need to do some version of it this year, and we need new ECP space. The school committee identified what seemed to them the best solution: buy modular buildings this spring and use them for the ECP. And I know that several school committee members toured the buildings and liked them, and some of them are already set up as preschool classrooms. And buying them would have been, in my understanding, a cost-effective medium-term solution that would have allowed us to redraw the lines this year and leave them that way for some number of years, long enough to work on building a new permanent ECP building. But because the city council won't approve those funds, we have to turn to a short-term solution. So to put it bluntly, this means we have to redistrict essentially twice. Once this year, because we've hit a crisis point, but because there's no new ECP space, we have to make do with option 1 or option 2. And then once we figure out a long-term solution for the ECP in the years to come, we'll have to redistrict again. And then in the meantime, there will be various other adjustments. So it may be possible that some families will be moved twice, even though I understand that the school committee will try its utmost to avoid that. But we will have to have these discussions again in a few years, and this process will be inconvenient and contentious and expensive. So let me repeat this. Without the modulars, we're going to have to redistrict twice. And all of us who live in Woburn might as well get used to this idea right now. I want to make it very clear that I don't blame the school committee at all for this outcome. You came up with a good solution, but now we have to do our best with other options. And I've looked at the 2 options before us today, and it seems to me that option 1 is preferable. Neither one solves the problem of needing new space, so I believe, as I've said, that we'll have to redistrict again. Given this prospect, I would prefer to, 1, choose the option that means moving the fewest kids this year, and 2, choose the option that sets appropriate expectations among the community, i.e. that what we're doing this year is not a permanent solution, and that looks forward with a long-term plan. On both of those points, option 1 wins. Now, of course, I don't want my kids to have to change schools. We can see the Malcolm White from our house, and we're quite happy there. But I believe that we need to move forward with the big picture and with the future in mind. So thank you, school committee and everyone else, for your hard work, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you. If you have something in writing you would like to give to the school committee, you can. Anyone else that would like to come before the school committee and speak on this matter? Hi.
Hi. I'm Ashley Peterson at 20 Cranston Circle, and I wrote something, and I'm just going to read it. I have a child currently at Malcolm White, and I have another that's going to be starting kindergarten in the fall. I'm a licensed mental health professional, and I'm here to advocate for the mental health and wellness of our children during the redistricting. While most reports recently concerning the behavioral issues at the high school point toward the way administration was managing the situation, I am not surprised to hear of the behavioral challenges. It certainly feels like COVID concerns are in the past, but the impact and ripple effects of both family stress and lost social emotional learning that occurred during COVID will continue to pop up over the next several years. Many families lost a sense of safety, connection to loved ones, and also juggled financial, economic, and domestic issues. The family stress ultimately can create a ripple effect onto the mental health of our youth. At each developmental age throughout the school system, students lost exposure to and practice or mastery of important social, emotional, and behavioral skills. For example, how to navigate group dynamics and resolve conflicts, key social communication skills, cooperation, self-control, and frustration tolerance. Additionally, our political climate has become one that promotes bullying and targeting weakness with demonstrations of toughness or aggression. During the City Council meeting, select members did not seem to understand the importance of early learning nor the value of investing in an ECP that would provide consistent, accessible, and unified skill building for our youngest students across the city. The investment into ECP could provide quicker mastery of skills, access to family support and resources, and overall better outcomes for the Woburn community. Longitudinally, these students theoretically would develop academic, social, emotional, and/or English language gains sooner, which could create more equity and connection among students, as well as decreased service needs, including Tier 2 interventionist, C-grid IEP services, and potentially fewer out-of-district expenses. Children who experience bullying, food insecurity, housing disruption, racism, trauma, developmental disabilities, or sensory disorders, to name a few examples, are more at risk of developing behavioral health challenges in the classroom. Many students with one or more of these pre-existing factors do not have the protection of an IEP or 504, however, thrive under the wings of supportive teachers, expected routines, and familiarity. Sudden change to routines, the social anxieties of fitting into already formed friend groups, and unfamiliar environments can create a stress response that may increase internalizing or externalizing classroom behaviors. Tonight, I make a plea to the school committee and administration while considering next year's school budget to allocate funding to ensure that each school has 2 mental health supports located on site at all times. Additionally, each school should have a clear plan for how they will create an inclusive community that integrates and welcomes new students, not just the first week, but strategically throughout the first year. Lastly, recess has been an absolute nightmare, and I would anticipate that following redistricting, vulnerable students will struggle the most during unstructured times. I beg you to please allocate funding or come up with creative plans to ensure recess at each school is well-staffed. School redistricting is a necessity given the state of our schools. However, thorough consideration of proactive interventions are needed to ensure all students are supported prior to and during their first year in the new school setting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee and speak on this matter, or any matter? Hello.
Hello, my name is Frank DeVita. I'm on Minchin Drive in Woburn. Thank you first to the school committee for all the work you've done, to the consultants, both of them. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate the options being presented. It seems to me that while I understand the importance of the ECP and the state law, thank you, the Reeves is being impacted because of our hospitality, but also because of our space. So both options I see, at least in the near term, adds either overcrowding potentially at the Reeves, or it, sorry, got to look at my notes.
All right.
We're talking about overcrowding at the Reeves or moving, K through 5 students out of the Reeves in option 2. I want to echo what some of the other parents said. I think being at this city council meeting, the answer wasn't no on modulars, and I'm convinced that modulars are the best option. I would like the committee to look at starting down the option 1 path, but that gives us time to convince the city council, maybe not next year, maybe next year, that the modulars are the correct option, and that alleviates the medium-term issues that I see with the inevitable increase in ECP students at the Reeves. So, just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge the memorandum that you sent us outlining your position as well. So it was very, thank you, I appreciate it. Good. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this matter?
It's cool over here.
Sometimes it's really not.
All right, hello, I am Brian Preventure.
Can I just stop and just say thank you for being in the Parent Advisory Committee? Appreciate it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I want to make sure I said that.
It's all right. Rumford Park, Ave. I am on the Parent Advisory Committee, but if you don't mind, I'd like to just speak to you as a parent tonight. So I've been watching the redistricting rather closely ever since last year when this process really got going. I've been following along. And it's clear, like, we need to do something, and I'm glad that we're starting to take action. And I've looked at so many maps. No map is perfect. They all have their flaws. But anything that we can do to help our students, to help the learners, we really need to do. But for me, it's all about the plan. We need a really strong plan. And to me, that's option 1. Option 1 of the proposed options would be to redistrict in a phased manner, setting up some type of end goal where we have an ECP, we have a new building, we have more space for our learners. Hopefully that's a new North Woburn school, but I'll take any school at this point. I just want to make sure that, as we're planning this out, that we are just keeping that long-term plan and that we're deciding on a sustainable option. And I really think that that is going to be option 1, because I really don't want to go through this again for another 30 years or so. I believe that's the last time that it was redistrict. My concern with option 2 is, of course, that we're only considering the here and now. There's no thought to the future. And it would scare me that, in 2 years, 3 years, we convince the modular option, or we build a new school, we move that ECP out, and then all of a sudden we're redistricting the entire city all over again. I, for one, do not want to have to go through this. It has been a long process. It's been contentious at times. I don't think that future residents or future families will want to go through it again either. So I understand that this is really complex. We all want what's best for our kids. I think we owe it to the students currently and the future students of the system to just be very intentional in what we do, be very thoughtful about the decision. The phased approach is exactly what that is. It's being very intentional. It's thinking about the future. It's considering all the different pieces. The one thing that I will ask, and I'm going to urge the committee, is just about the timeline. We are almost in April. I was requested to fill out whether or not I would be returning for after school by March 1st. Okay, I would like to know what school I am ending up with so that I can make a plan for my family, and I'm sure that the rest of the city feels the same exact way. We need to be able to make plans for our kids come September, whether that's before school, after school, or anything else in there. So I really urge you, please have your special meetings. Please make sure that we get this done as soon as possible so families can be told, we can talk to our kids, we can explain why they may have to move or their friend may have to move. Please just consider the timeline. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee and speak on this matter? Or any matter?
I feel so unprepared. I don't have anything ready, so I apologize. I'm just gonna
That's okay.
Hi, I'm Lauren Fennelly, 10 Kennedy Road. I emailed you like a giant email before this meeting.
Okay, I'm glad to see you tonight.
Thank you so much. This needs to happen 100%. And I think no matter what we do, everyone's going to be really emotional about it. Personally, I have 2 kids in the ECP, and I have 2 kids at the Herald, and option 1, we're going to end up at the Reeves, and I'm already there. I'm at both schools anyway. So it's emotional. I think that just some clarification on wherever we go, what's happening with the buildings. I think I'm a little confused and annoyed that we haven't figured out a home or a place or sent anything to build an ECP building. Or, I mean, I know there's a lot of renovations and things that we need to plan, but when we do this redistrict and there's going to be a process, we need to know timeline, because we're going to redistrict again as soon as the buildings are done, which we've already, I'm sure you'd already discussed. Sorry, I don't remember your name. So having a plan, like a firm plan, because this is going to be taxing on everyone, but I do have or 2 kids in the early childhood program, and will eventually end up at the Reeves. And by the time my youngest is in the Reeves, are we going to then get switched again to another school? And just like avoiding having kids shuffle in the next 7 or 8 years, because I think in the council meeting last week, it said, it could be 8 years from the time you submit, which I don't know, please correct me if I'm wrong. But that could potentially affect children more than once, which is really disruptive. Another huge thing that is a concern of mine, and I think why I'm leaning towards 1, is the phasing. The COVID children that were on iPads and not in class, my 4th grader going into 5th grade next year is going to move to another school, which it's fine. He'll make friends. He's resilient. But he was that kid who had kindergarten or preschool on an iPad. So you're disrupting these kids that already were a little bit behind socially and probably, lacking in other ways too. So it's a little bit disruptive for some children. But it needs to get done, and I don't know. So there's no great reason. I'm sure this is like so easy for all of you now. But I think it's a lot to consider. I think the phasing would be important, but also maybe make things even more confusing. And then my last thing, one thing to consider is as you are phasing, because I am in a section that's going to move ultimately, is there, I guess it would make it even more complex, but like if I'm in H14 and I have 2 kids in the ECP program, and by year 3 we're going to be at the Reeves, if they're at the Reeves or the preschool, is there an option to allow those kids that are in those districts that will eventually move to the Reeves? Can we have an option to just keep them in, you're going to go to the Reeves, just enroll them in the Reeves? I'm fine having kids in 2 different schools, but just like throwing it out there that if you know that there's a transition happening and kids are already in one spot. But that's it. Sorry. I hope some of that made sense. But thank you so much.
Very much. I appreciate it. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee and speak on this matter? I'm not quite sure I know you.
Rachel Kuberry. I speak at every meeting.
Thank you. Rachel.
I live at 6 Blake Street. I'm a Harold Wyman parent and the Harold Wyman rep for the advisory group. So as the Harold Wyman rep, all I want to say, and as a career special educator, I just want to say I so appreciate your commitment to keeping our special education programs in place. For the Harold Wyman in particular, that's the Rise 2 program. So thank you for that. The rest is my own, because my community hasn't reviewed this yet. So I want to say to the community, as others have, that we really need to do this. As a Harold Wyman parent, the space issues at the Harold Wyman are really critical this year, and they'll be worse this fall. So I understand that a lot of community members are not at schools that have the critical needs that the Harold Wyman has. And so this affects the whole city, and everybody's situation looks different. But remember that if you're feeling like your school situation is okay, know that other people are feeling that their school situation is not okay. And a comment about class size. It's a hard truth that we didn't get the modulars and that we don't have extra square footage for next year, and so the class size is what it is. Like, there's no decision to be made today that will decrease class size for next year. That's not possible. And so I like numbers and I like charts, if you don't know that about me, and I looked at all of the average class size for these models, and it's the same. So it's the same number of sections, it's the same class size. That surprises me. So I want to learn more about that, but that's great news for people who are worried that their class size is going to go up. Your class size might go up if you've been in a really small pocket because we're redistributing kids across the city, but it's not going to go up as a city, which is awesome. And some comments for the committee. As other people have said, I am really concerned about the timeline. I've said that before this year, last year as well, which does give me preference to option one. So option one would allow us to take sort of a smaller bite this fall that feels more manageable to me. I question how big the small bite needs to be with some of the ideas for phasing, and I'd love the phase option to be as small as possible that first year because we are so concerned about what we can do between now and then to support our students and families. I think that it's really hard to make this decision and weigh in without knowing how many kids move in these options. I hope that that information will be forthcoming, maybe not before we pick these two options, but after, and we're looking at different maps because a guiding principle of the committee is least disruption, and a lot of community members have interpreted that to be move the least number of students. So whether that's what it really means or not, without having a number there, it's hard for us to know if it's least disruptive. There's been a lot of discussion about rising fifth graders. We both have fourth graders, Lauren and I, and if they will be exempt. I understand that we might not be able to say that tonight or even next week, but I think giving the community some expectations around when they could hear more about that would be really helpful. I think in order to make option one successful, we would need guidelines around implementation, most importantly when families would find out if they're going to move sort of in that second year. Do we find out on June 1st or do we find out on March 1st? That makes it very different. If we're considering option one, and I said this on Monday as well, I think we really need to take official steps towards a new building. I was disappointed to hear this group table that earlier this year, and I'm very excited that it's on the agenda for today because I want to hear more about that because it goes hand in hand with option one. Lastly, I want to talk about middle school, even though we're not talking about middle school. So I did share a community survey with the committee that over 300 people did, and I just want to note here that only 25% of the respondents said that they want to stop splitting elementary schools up to two different middle schools, which means the community supports the split. And that also aligns with option one in the phased redistrict. When I think about those conversations forthcoming about middle school, if we do a phased elementary redistrict, we would also do a phased middle school. It gets like muddy the further the phase goes and the more technical it has. So considering when we make decisions around middle school, how that impacts these different options, continuing to split our middle school seems to align nicely over here as well. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hear from you soon. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee and speak on this matter?
Hi, my name is Emily Peters. I live at 4 Summit Street. I'm the Reeves rep.
Hi.
So I wanted to voice that I'm also in favor of option one. I think that it's important to move forward knowing the bigger picture for families so that they can prepare. I think someone had mentioned doing choice to their new school, which I also think would be a great idea for families who are able to do that. And I also wanted to echo the people who have said that we should move small sections for this year. It should be as minimal as possible because we're close to the end of the year. And I think that a lot of thought has to be put into what happens next. So rather than jump the gun and do a huge phase option, I think it needs to start off as small as possible so that our overcrowded schools are more comfortable and go from there. And we always have time to plan forward. We know the schools won't stop growing. So, that said, I'm on a group chat with some Reeves parents, and their biggest question is how will we fit the ECP in with the phased options? Because it only shows the district growing. So they have a lot of questions, and I understand why. We'd like to get answers on that, and also add the ECP to our charts to see how they fit in with the numbers. I know they're changing, I know it's growing constantly, but we would like to see how they would fit in, along with the number of classrooms for each school to see how we can accommodate that best. And I think that's it for the notes I just scribbled. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Ms. Peters. And thank you for being on the Parent Advisory Committee, and also Ms. Kuberry, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this matter? Hi.
Hi, my name's Beth Fortnum. I live at 21 Glenwood Ave. I'm a parent of 2 kids at the Reeves. I actually did apply for the Parent Advisory Committee, but I wasn't selected. So I just want to, I did attend the City Council meeting last week, and I just want to reiterate what some of the other parents here have said, which is that I think the modulars are still on the table. I don't think it was completely rejected by the City Council, but what I saw last week was just kind of a lack of a long-term plan and how they were going to be used as far as what was going to happen in order to eventually get the kids out of the modulars. And so I feel like if we can revisit that discussion, come up with a timeline for rebuilding a new elementary school so that kids at Alta Vista don't have to be in a school that smells like mold anymore, and fill out the application for that school. And if we have this plan and we go back to the City Council and we say, this is our plan, we're going to move ECP into the modulars, we're going to rebuild, we're going to build this school, we're going to move Lynn Scott and Alta Vesta into the new school and ECP, and you have a timeline and a well-thought-out procedure on how this is going to happen, and you present that to the parents beforehand, the parents can all write to their City Council members and say, hey, please approve this $5 million budget for the modulars so that we can have the limited amount of disruption to our classes and not have seriously overcrowding in our schools. So I would just like to ask that you reconsider this, but this time go back with like more information, the information the City Council requested, such as the certification of the modulars. I mean, I've driven by them. I know what they look like down on the Cape. Like, from the outside, they look a little rough, but I think if you get them, certified by an engineer, then, the City Council might be more willing to listen to you. So please just think about it as an option 3 on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These are great comments. Is there anyone else that would like to speak before the committee on this matter? Or any matter?
No.
Absolutely not. Hi. Good
Hi,
evening.
good evening. Craig Parker, 3 Eagle Road. Entitled, ungrateful, unprofessional, stay in your lane, spoiled. As I said, my name is Craig Parker, and in the 4 years that I was a school counselor in the guidance department at Woburn High School, I heard myself and my colleagues described using these words and phrases and more. These descriptions were not from students or from parents or from peers. They were from administrators and department directors and curriculum coordinators. And when I tried to address these characterizations directly with the people who said them, I was either condescended to or ignored. Worse, my fellow counselors and teachers pleaded with me not to say anything because they were convinced that I would be targeted by leadership for raising my concerns over how we were being treated. I'm here today because those warnings came true. As evidenced by recent events within the guidance department at the high school, I was right to make the extremely difficult and painful decision to leave Woburn High to avoid being part of a department that lacked the support and respect of its leaders. Yet our department, along with our colleagues at the middle schools, we support students in a variety of ever-evolving ways on a daily basis. And on top of those, I've worked with colleagues who spent weeks of their own time helping homeless students find temporary housing and then helping those same students be placed with local families. I have another colleague who provided essential support and resources, again on her own time, to students associated with the recent illegal smuggling operations here in Woburn. And one of my colleagues, she's been the main organizer of the Tanner Tutor peer tutoring program, which has made a difference for dozens, if not hundreds, of students over the years, in addition to her regular responsibilities. And she's done this with no extra pay and with very little recognition. These are the people the district leadership has labeled spoiled. As vital as it is that the committee be aware and do more to support our counselors, my concern here is also that this is the way many of my colleagues are treated by leadership. Teachers and nurses, custodians, cafeteria staff, special educators, paraprofessionals, and yes, counselors. All of us matter. The schools do not run without us, yet in my time with Woburn Public Schools, I was all too often made to feel like we were part of the problems and never part of the solutions. I hope that can change. As Dr. Donna Hicks said in her book, Leading with Dignity, relationships thrive when both parties feel that they are seen, heard, and valued. So I come to you tonight as a former Woburn educator and a current Woburn resident to ask that you please strive to create a better working relationship with the educators in our schools. Identify the patterns of behavior among leadership that contribute to a toxic school culture and address them. Make it an imperative to ensure that every educator, every employee in our school system feels seen and heard and valued. If we truly all care about our students, and I know we do, then it's not just up to us to do our best for them, it's up to us to set an example of how we can all work together to make the Woburn Public School System the best it can be. Thank you for your time.
Okay, is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee? Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee?
I wasn't going to speak. It's kind of hard to follow. Okay, so I'm Alex Tisdale, 5 Majority Lane, and I am the parent rep for the Malcolm White. So first I want to thank the committee and everybody for all of your hard work on everything that we're talking about here today. Dr. Ryan, I wanted to thank you for clarifying some things about the ECP for everybody. You spoke about ideal time to intervene for kids with any sort of different learning and development pathways. As a nurse practitioner, this is important and kind of rings true for me. This really is during this crucial early period that we're able to impact these children and their learning journeys and set them up for success. There are studies that show that if a child feels frustrated or starts to dislike school from as early as kindergarten, then that will travel with them throughout the rest of their school career. So it is so important to recognize that the ECP and kindergarten and all these early childhood experiences are very important, and it's not just daycare. I've talked about this before publicly, but my son is one of these kids on an IEP, and the services provided to him by the ECP and the special ed department, now that we're in kindergarten, has been invaluable. These providers truly work tirelessly for our kids, so I think it's important that we recognize this and recognize the importance of their work so they can continue to keep doing it. I wanted to thank all of the other parents for speaking tonight and all of the other nights. 2 parents from the Malcolm White spoke to 2 things that are very important to me: mental health and well-being of our kids, as well as the fact that we do need to step up and do something to help all of the kids across the district access the education that they deserve. This is why I'm in support of option 1. Like Brian said, there is no perfect option. There's no perfect map. But this approach offers the best chance at doing right by everyone and doing it longer term. It will also give us the opportunity to help support our kids through this. Kids are resilient, families are resilient, but we have to give them the tools to be successful in doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being on the Parent Advisory Committee. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee and speak on this matter?
Hi, all.
Hi.
I am Sarah Bergman McCool. I live on Hinston Road. I'm a Malcolm White parent. And I'm really glad to see so many people here and to be having this conversation. I think this is a helpful presentation to be putting together for the community to be thinking about a district-wide problem and a district-wide solution. I think that I have a few questions here that I was jotting down. I'm going to echo some of what has already been said. I think that in thinking about these options, it's very helpful to think about the numbers, and we, the public, don't know what those numbers are of how many students are impacted. Priya made mention of this, that that information is going to be forthcoming. I really hope that that would be part of the next wave of data that gets shared, so that as we're evaluating these first three scenarios in option one, which seems to be the favorite option right now, that we are really able to understand how many students would be impacted, because that is on our guiding principles, and it's really difficult to not be in the data as much as the school committee and administration is, and be able to offer positive and helpful public comment without having that data. I think related to that is also thinking about these budget implications of doing this redistrict and how we are going to be satisfying the needs of the students who have to move. Hopefully that this year will be a very small, truly targeted change, but it is going to be in a long-term direction, so that we have a final map that we are looking toward, that we are going to be making our moves to get there. And I think that even though it will hopefully be a small number of students, there will be costs associated with that, and I'm curious to see where that is going to fit into our school committee budget, and making sure that we are going to have the staff, if necessary, to support these students in new spaces. I appreciate that the specialized programs for the special ed students are going to stay where they are in all of the plans that I've seen. I hope that continues to be the case, but there are still going to be needs for other gen ed students or multilingual learners or other folks who need to be supported in their new schools. I also am curious what the implementation will be this year in terms of bringing in, if we will have enough time to bring people into those schools, if they're going to meet new teachers, if there's going to be a way for parents who've not been necessarily following this redistrict and waiting for the answer, and then figuring out the scramble of, like, what do I do before school and after school, and who are going to be the safe people for my student in this school. All of those pieces will need to be addressed and quickly, so that we can do that. I think that I'm also curious how this phased implementation will be. If we have a final map that we're looking at, what will we do with new registrations for kindergarten, but also if somebody moves into a neighborhood, and I think Lauren mentioned this, if you move into a neighborhood or you know that your student on the final map is going to be in a different school than your neighbors are going to, will there be a process where that student, that family can make the choice, like, I don't want to be redistricted in 2 years, I want to make friends with a cohort that I'm going to stay with, and how are we going to handle that as a district? Hopefully there are other districts that we can look to who've managed these phased redistricts and have some wisdom that can offer us, so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because I know that there is a tremendous amount of work that's gone into the last 2 years of trying to get to this point, and I'm hoping that we can lean on other neighboring communities to guide us in how we do new enrollments and getting them set up. And the last piece I will make is I have a rising middle schooler. She's going to be going to the Kennedy. I think we've tabled what the school committee has said that they're tabling, talking about the middle school redistrict, but I do think that it has to happen in tandem with this conversation, so that as we're thinking about where these elementary schools are being set up, that we're also thinking about the guiding principles of the middle schools. I thought perhaps we would get to it. I am appreciating the direction that we are going tonight and with this presentation, but I also think that they do need to work in tandem. I think it is helpful, and I hope the school committee has heard it, that there is a large majority of folks who are appreciating that splitting of some schools allows us to have a more robust neighborhood school situation for our elementary schools, and also increases walkability to our middle schools and decreases transportation costs. I don't have the numbers on that. I hope that that is going to be provided as a good argument for why we are keeping that as part of one of the guiding principles of our middle schools, so that perhaps there is better balance, but there is the option for people who can see and walk to a school continuing to go there for middle school, and that that decision of those guiding principles is part of this conversation, so that as people are thinking about what's happening next year, is my child going to have to move when they finally get around to redistricting in the middle schools, that we're able to have that in mind and have some clarity and hopefully some less anxiety for folks who are doing, who are moving into middle school. I will leave you with that. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee and speak on this matter? No? Hello.
Sridhar for Lafayette Place. I have one child in Reeves and one going into high. So I had a few questions which weren't answered in this presentation. One was whether you looked at a phased approach for option 2, because everyone says option 1 is better because it's phased, but you could phase option 2. Yeah. And the second is what happens if you pick option 1 but you don't have a new space for the ECP, then what happens to Reeves? Right? And the last comment is for high school. I was wondering if you're thinking about a later start time for high school and an earlier start time for elementary. I know some neighboring towns have done that. It just helps the high school students get more sleep. That's all I had.
I just want to clarify, sir. We can't answer questions.
Yeah, okay.
It's this weird thing where
Okay,
you
that's
can
fine, yeah.
talk to us and you can ask us questions,
Sure.
but we just stare at you.
Yeah.
And that's because we can't engage with the public back and forth.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
but I wrote you questions down and we can get them answered for you. Thank you so much, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to come before the committee to speak on this matter?
Oh, hello. Allison Bennett. I live at 88.5 Harrison Ave. I have a 5th grader in elementary school, so I am unique in the fact that this really has no impact on me anymore, so to speak. However, I am also unique in the fact that my family started their time in the Wyman, moved to the Herald, so I guess we have representation across the group, right? So I support option 1. I think a phased approach is probably the least disruptive, and I appreciate the fact that there are options. I really appreciate the fact that you said that what was up there is not the end game, because I think what I see is the Herald being completely eradicated again. So there's one, I think, surviving Herald section in the Herald Wyman. So I think for those families, that's a difficult situation. They've already been moved. And I get that the kids that were there aren't being moved twice, and that's logical. However, there are families that are potentially being moved twice. I think if there's an opportunity at looking at making those sections or those components smaller, to look at a way to potentially minimize that impact would be great. But lastly, I just want to talk about programs for making sure their families are stabilized, because I think before and after school program is super important, and that exists at the Herald Wyman today and doesn't exist everywhere else. So I just want to make sure we take all of that into consideration for these folks that, I think the Shamrock was talked about having their school taken away, a bunch of them, right? So this is the Herald having that opportunity twice, and I recognize that the Herald Wyman needs change. It definitely does. But just some way to make it a little less for that area of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett. Appreciate public comment. Is there anyone else that would like to speak before the committee on this matter? Seeing none. Okay.
Close public hearing.
I have a motion to close public comment.
Sorry.
Second.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Okay, so, Let's start with questions. Does anyone have questions for the administration on the maps? Okay, go ahead. Vice Chair Chisholm.
Some of the questions that were asked, I think we need just to have to clarify for people so they don't think that they come in and do this and then we don't pay attention to them. The modulars that we went for was kind of like this year deal at the price that they were. If we were to buy modulars full price, it was going to be somewhere around the $30 million or some crazy.
Yeah, so the modulars that we spoke about were available this year. Again, they're in Nauset, being used currently by the Nauset Public Schools. Nauset paid $500,000 to acquire them. We were told, make a reasonable offer. The biggest expense, and I think we've gone through this, really is the transport and setting them all up. And so, Ms. Wetzel, who's not here, I think looked at pricing out like brand new modulars. And I don't want to be misquoted with her, but I think she indicated they were close to $1 million per module, brand new. But
So I just don't want people to think that we have this option to go forever. It was this year or not. And I don't think we got a warm and fuzzy. I mean, they didn't vote on it at the city council, but I didn't see any support for it at the city council level. So that's why it's kind of, we have to go back to these two options, and the modular option was taken off the table. And I just, with the new school, I've been fighting for this forever for the North Woburn, but we have to do that, and we will talk about that and get that done. So it could take years to get that done, but we have to have city council approval because our last quote for a new elementary school was going to be about $110 million. So that absolutely has to have approval before we do any kind of documentation and sending it to MSBA so they know that we are just asking for it with no money behind the deal. So we'll have to make sure that we do that. So I just want people to realize that we are doing our homework and we're trying the best we can, but time is of the essence and we have other things going on too, such as budget. And coming into budget, I just want to make sure that we know if this is going to add to our budget, whatever proposal we have. I mean, I know we can't get down to the actual number per se, but are we going to add to busing with the option we choose? You know, and I know you can't say, yes, our teacher's going to be coming and going, are we keeping staff the same? You know, will there be any additional costs that way?
I can answer some of it.
Okay.
And again, until you pick an option, the numbers aren't certain, but I understand that you need to have ballparks of things.
Right.
In terms of the number of educators, it's relatively the same. It's plus or minus one as we go across. And again, once you draw final lines, we'll know the number, but it's not a drastic number either direction.
Okay.
They're relatively the same. We did sit down with Ms. Carpenter today regarding transportation, and again, you don't have certain numbers. However, it is not believed that any of these options at this point in time would
add to it.
Would have any drastic differences. No.
Okay.
You'd be swapping out buses, so where one is going, another would replace. Again, it's not certain. We'd have to have it to drawn out, but we did look into the two kind of biggest predictors, and none of them were tipping the scale like in a large direction one way or another.
Okay, I appreciate that because I just, budget's my thing.
Right.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chisholm. At this point, I think I asked Dr. Crowley to look into, what the MSBA statement of interest would entail, because I think that there was the impression that it was a quick letter. So, Dr. Crowley, did you look into that? What it would take to the amount of information that we would have to give to the MSBA in order to do a statement of interest, and whether or not that would be reasonable for the school committee to expect that could be done by April 11th?
You want me to answer that?
Yes.
Yeah. So working backwards, April 11th is the application date for a statement of interest in SOI for this upcoming year, and with that in mind, I wound up speaking to multiple people in the area who've gone through the process, and also reached out to a couple people that do consulting on this process. Really what has to happen it can range from anywhere from like a 50 to 100-page application, and what you need to do is look at each of the buildings and the age of all of the roof, the window, and submit based on those types of pieces of information. And to Ms. Chisholm's comment earlier, we would need to know, is it for North Woburn or is it for a middle school? And that would be step one. And then step two would be for the school committee to approve the SOI and the city council to also approve the SOI.
Okay.
Before I would be the person clicking submit, but that's the process. The MSBA opens this up in late December. They expect it to take months to do this process, and we are March 26th, and with April 11th as the deadline. The lift would be very significant and with a truncated timeline. So
Okay.
I don't know if I'm answering that well enough for you, but
No,
I
that's
do think that we do need a school. So we will do
Right.
the work. We will,
Okay.
we will, but I think there's some decisions that need to get made to inform what it is that we are working towards.
Okay, so I guess then I'll just reiterate that the committee put this in abeyance until immediately after redistricting. And the reason why we voted that way was that because without knowing where the seats are and what the space capacity actually are without doing redistricting, it would be a very, the MSBA application wouldn't be as thorough if that's the case. So I think it sounds like the committee's not going to take any action with regards to an MSBA statement of interest at this point. But I just wanted sorry, Ms. Mulren, make the public aware of that. Go ahead, Ms. Mulren.
I got just curious. It was my understanding some people were out today at the Alta Vista checking on that building.
Yeah.
Can we get clarification on that?
Certainly. So we work closely with the MSBA, and so they are here this week doing basically an audit. We've Mr. Burnham, Director of Facilities, he and Mr. Dizio, myself, worked on a survey, about 5,000 questions, genuinely, that the MSBA asked. We submitted that maybe a week or two ago, and then part of that follow-up is they come out and visit each of the buildings and tour with, in this case, Mr. Burnham at the high school, Damien. But that is happening, and so it's actually an important part of the process because then they'll have our data when we are able to submit.
Okay, and with that said, Dr. Crowley, I think back at the beginning of the year, I asked about the application process and where we were going. The redistricting got in the way, and a few other things got in the way, so there wasn't a big appetite for that. And here we are at crunch time, and I mean, we're talking about getting it done, but yet there's so many steps involved. Are we going to be declined immediately because we didn't fill something in? If we asked you tonight to, if I made a motion to allow the superintendent to go ahead and compile a statement of interest for a new North Woburn school, I mean, I could try that right now, actually, just because it has to be done. And if it can't be done, at least we gave it an effort, just like I said in January. Give it a shot. You go to your parents, you ask your father for $10. He says, no, go ask your mother. Ask your mother for $10. So I think, again, you have to try, you have to ask, you have to at least be out there, be in the running. We've done these things in the past. Is it a ton of work? Yes, it is. Is it necessary? Yes, it is. So I guess with that said, I'd like to make a motion, and I don't know if we have a quorum here tonight, that, the school committee instruct the superintendent to forward a statement of interest for a North Woburn elementary school to meet the deadline. That's my motion.
Okay, I don't see a second. That motion fails.
Okay.
Okay, are there any more questions on the redistricting, Matt? Vice Chair Chisholm?
I just want to say, I didn't second that because I think that, as the superintendent just told us, it's a time-consuming thing, and we have budget, and we have redistricting, and we have other issues, and we're trying to run a school system. So I think that we have to do it thoroughly, and I believe we redistrict, it looks better, because we've tried to make sure, because they just look at seats, and if they see buckets of seats that they think is available, because according to the class sizes.
Not going to cease you because no interest, no statement of interest going to them right
So,
now.
but we'll go,
So
if we
it's
do the
good.
redistricting, and then that shows that we've tried every opportunity to make sure that we have equal spacing for all of our schools, and we can get it done, and we can get it done right, and we can really push for that. And again, we don't even know. We're saying the North Woburn School, but is there more drive for the middle school? Won't be with me, but that, that's just, I know you're shocked by that, but yeah, we do have to get the North Woburn School with the ECP, and that will solve this problem is where we put those children. So I think, and again, we don't even know if they will fund that, so we have to make sure we know that too going in. So there's a lot of work. It's not just taking a piece of paper and writing a letter saying, hey, we want a new school, can you send us $110 million? And then we also have to find out the funding, because the city council is going to want to know what will be our reimbursement at some point. It might not be with that first letter, but we're going to need to know that before we're even accepted or denied. So, if we only
No
get...
second still. You're going to second my motion
No,
or not?
no.
Okay, thank
I'm
you.
saying, if we only get 37% back, the city's going to have a big tab to pick up. I mean, we built the high school for $67 million with a 64% reimbursement. So we need to know that we're going to get, and if we're only getting 37 on 110 million, it's going to be a little bit of bite for the taxpayers, but we have to make sure we sell it to everybody and not do it just on a whims. I know you've been asking for it, and we'll get there, but...
We have an opportunity.
Yeah.
If you can't ask for it, but no one seconded the motion, so we're fine.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chisholm. Okay, any more discussion on the maps or any clarifying questions before our vote next week? Yes,
On
Ms.
the maps,
Mulrennan.
again, I know we're doing the best we can to get the word out about these maps and the options, one or two, again, through the advisory committee, the website, the school department website, the cable TV people, however we can get the word out that there's going to be a vote again, these are the options, these are the different scenarios, and people will have an opportunity to maybe chime in again. There's going to be public participation that evening on the first for the vote.
Absolutely,
So
Mr. Mulrennan.
they'll have a chance to speak again that night as well. Just, again, there's more to follow, as indicated by the consultant tonight, but it's just picking an option and moving on from there. So I just want to make sure that the word gets out between now and next Tuesday that there's going to be another vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mulrennan.
That was, I was going to clarify a lot of the timeline Mr. Moran just alluded to. But yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that the public has a chance to digest this beyond tonight, and that the committee and a fuller committee has the chance to digest this beyond tonight, that we have the opportunity to ask questions, that the public has the opportunity to ask questions again before we make, I'm not going to say a final determination because this is step one, but a determination on this. So we've already voted on it, but I absolutely support the idea of a special meeting to advance this forward. And I would encourage also members of the public, any questions that you have about this choice, about what follows after this choice, please ask them so that we can get as much good information out to the public as we can in advance of our vote. I'm going to throw the advisory committee members under the bus as well, but feel free to email them. They can shoot any questions that they can't answer to us. Email us directly. Any of those are fine, but we want to make sure that we get as many questions as we're able before the vote so that we can avoid people having questions after the vote.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Chisholm, would you mind taking the gavel for just one
Sure.
second? I wanted to just...
Make the pass down. Look at this, you're making me move.
Good for you.
Jeez. Okay, I'll recognize Ms. Crowley.
Thank you. Just a couple things I want to express positively about these maps that I'm looking at. I'm really grateful for the work that the administration has done. This is a tremendous amount of work. I'm very impressed by the special, substantially separate programs remaining in the buildings. I just really appreciate the hard work and thoughtfulness around that. I wish that we had drawn a map looking at a fully separate space for the ECP, because I think we should nurture that program. I think it has very, very, very strong educational value, which I've said multiple years, and I really want that all of the ECP to share the resources and for these children to have their own space and not share the space among two elementary schools, but we resolved that in a subcommittee, and I appreciate the committee's work on that. But overall, I'm responding very positively. I don't know which direction I'm leaning in, but they both have excellent pros and cons. I'm a little concerned about the redistricting every year and having sort of unexpected changes over a period of time. I do think that once, on the other hand, though, I think if we have something in mind for a separate space for an ECP, we can have something in, place and develop that over time. So those are my comments, and I wanted to make sure that I go on the record at saying that I think the ECP needs a separate space, and that I wish the committee had looked for 20 rooms in the district altogether. But other than that, I'm very, very appreciative of all the work that everyone has done, very appreciative of all the work that the parents have done, and the deep work that we have ahead of us. And I look forward to working with all of you, because I think you are all excellent leaders for this community. So, thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I can give you back a gavel. And I'm shocked that you won an ECP all by yourself. I'm just, it comes as an enlightening to me tonight.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chisholm. Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could just add one additional thing.
Of course you can, Mr. Lipset.
I just, and this occurred to me as you were speaking, I just want to make sure that it didn't get buried in what we were talking about. And it's so a question to administration. The goal for any phased redistrict is that no family and no component would be moved twice. The goal is that we are moving consistently toward a final goal, moving only those components that need to move toward that final goal, and not, just sort of rolling the dice and seeing what happens at any given moment. There will be a plan that that no component is at risk of flip-flopping back and forth between multiple school districts.
What I envision is really kind of, as part of, if option one is determined, is really like a detailed timeline, and I think part of it is going to be what happens over the course of each year, and that there's going to need to be map maintenance, I guess is the word that I keep going back to. And I think that if you were to move a component that was not initially part of it, that we would then consider through map maintenance that then would be districted to said location. Like, in the end, I think that that's going to be part of having to look at the map yearly, because I think we also recognize that the long-term plan is the goal, but if it's 10 years, then there's going to be need to look at the map yearly and make adjustments. And I think it's really about being clear with everyone kind of what that process is, the timeline of when it is, when people will be notified of anything of those. And I think, again, it goes into the pros and cons, that like the unknowns of that piece of it. But I think that all of our goal has been that once you move someone, then that's it. You could again, I think we've talked about that, like once you move something, if that's considered, gray, and it could be that then as someone moves into the district or a new registration, whether if that got it enrolled differently. But I think that we're all pretty, set on once you've moved, that we do not want to move you again. And so every effort would be made. But I think, as I said earlier tonight, no crystal ball. And I don't, you don't want to overpromise. But if the intention is that no one would move more than one time, but that is the goal of all of this.
Thank you, Ms. Young, and thank you, Mr. Lipset, for clarifying if I said something that didn't quite line up. No, thank you. I really appreciate that. Okay. So, I risk saying that our next meeting on this topic will be April 1 without 3 members here to give their input. But obviously, it'll be publicly posted when the next meeting is, and the next meeting will, in fact, be the vote on option 1 or option 2. So, and we welcome, of course, your continued emails. This public comment tonight was extremely helpful. And in fact, I might, if the committee benefited from this format, then we may, we wouldn't do it after the vote. Okay. I'm just going to have a private thought process about that. But we absolutely will have public comment before our vote of the next meeting. Okay. Moving on. So the budget update.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Dizio. Is everyone okay? Does anyone need a recess? No? Okay.
So we're going to turn it over to Mr. Dizio, Director of Finance, momentarily for the FY26 budget. But before we do you want to drive this, Alex?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you want to weigh in on redistricting at all?
Oh, come on, Alex.
Next topic.
Jump in.
Pass?
Option 1 or option 2?
It's Vizio.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so since our last meeting on March 5th, there has been some progress in reducing the year-over-year increase, which we will get into. So as we continue to build the budget, of course, we keep in mind the Woburn Public Schools strategic plan focused on 3 key areas: incorporating routine collaboration time into the day, building tiered systems of support, and building systems and structures to support deeper learning and effective instructional practices. So, on March 5th, which was our last collective meeting, our percentage increase was at 8.46%. As of today, you'll see a budget percentage presented of 7.65%. And there has been a series of 26 budget line alterations that were made in getting here, which I would like to take some time to walk through. You all should have a list of these in your packets. So I won't be pulling them up on the screen, but you do have this list. So the first one on this list is reducing homeless transportation by $25,000. It's important to note this still represents a $25,000 increase year over year. As of today for FY25, I believe we're going to be okay, but would like to adjust this line for FY26 due to the unpredictability of this line. And if you guys have questions as I'm going through this, please stop me, but I will try to get through each of them. The second one is reducing electricity by $105,000. This is truly level funding this line. Again, as of today, I do believe that we will be slightly under for FY25, so I believe level funding for FY26 is a fiscally responsible move. We also do have the electrical reserve account in the event that this doesn't come to fruition. The next item on the...
Could you just tell us, like, the balance that would be if we need to use, how much is in that right now?
As of today, about $750,000.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So the next item on the list, reducing building services line by $25,000. Again, this still represents an increase of $75,000 year over year, and that's to address the aging systems in our buildings. Sticking with facilities, we would be reducing the building supplies by $6,250. Again, it still represents a $15,000 increase year over year, and that's just due to rising costs of supplies for goods for our buildings. Likewise, with custodial supplies, we decreased the previous budget by $6,000. This still represents a $10,000 increase year over year to address rising costs of custodial supplies. The next item on the list is reducing postage by $5,000. This will be more in line with FY25 actual. The next item on the list, and this is really repurposing, so we have a contingency loss line that has been there historically funded for $5,000 each year. We typically don't use this, and when we do, it ends up being for legal settlements for the most part. So what we decided to do going forward is to partly repurpose that to the legal line, and I'll get to that later on. The next item is reducing nursing supplies by $3,500. Again, that's to be more in line with FY25 actual. One of the shifts we were able to move 2 interventionists from the operating budget into a Title I grant. The next item on the lists are curriculum-based, so at the elementary instructional level, we were able to reduce by $9,000. $4,000 of that would come from STEM supplies, $5,000 from unencumbered, which is district-wide items. On curriculum professional development, we were able to reduce by $15,000. That would be $5,000 with admin leadership, $2,000 new teacher, $5,000 all district, $3,000 curriculum department. Next item on the list is
So we had a couple asks from the middle school level. So these were new asks this year, $10,000 each to fund after-school programs. While we're in a challenging budget cycle and looking to sort of reduce some lines, I think it makes sense to start with some of these new asks. It might make sense to do this next year, but I think this year we need to be diligent in reducing our budget asks.
And just to clarify, that doesn't mean it's stopping, it just means they're not adding more things to do with it.
It was, right now, it's the elementary, their elementary and middle school programming is the after-school program is at cost.
Okay.
And so it will continue that will be at cost for those to participate. This was to make it so that it wasn't at cost.
Okay. Yep, just to clarify, I just don't want...
Change in current practice, it was to create a more robust version.
Okay.
Yep.
Just don't want people to think we're not having it.
Yep,
It will still be
understood.
there, it'll be the same as existing.
Okay.
Thanks for that clarification, yep. So the next item on the list is curriculum office supplies, reducing by $1,500. Next item is to reduce by a curriculum coordinator. It's important to note this is due to attrition and not backfilling for a curriculum coordinator who will be leaving the district for another opportunity. Next item on the list, more shifting. So after careful review of the pre-K account and projected revenues and expenses for the next year, we did determine that we believe we'll be able to house the pre-K salaries for one additional fiscal year for FY26.
Alex, if I could just ask.
Sure.
If I could be recognized for this, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes.
So you said that we can do this for one more year?
Correct.
The implication there is that it would not be possible after this. This is the last year we would be able to do so.
I believe that's accurate, yes.
Thank you.
Yep. So next on the list would be the attrition of 2 teachers, 1 math, 1 PE, due to a resignation and retirement and not backfilling those vacancies. The next item would be student service contractual, reducing by $20,000. That represents level funding. Again, it's really level funding this line to be more in line with current and historical spending. Another one of the asks that we had this year was for temporary help with seasonal temporary employees for facilities. Usually this is, kids that help in the summertime. The ask was for $50,000. I think we can still fund this, but to do it at $25,000 and to get some help over the summer. So we did reduce that original ask of $50 to $25. The next one is some of the building-based line reductions. So if you look on the sheet, you'll see a total of about $65,000 in building-based line reductions. So what I did here is I looked at a 3-year period at all 10 of our schools, taking into account any years that may have been skewed by whether we were spending more or less for any reason. What I then did is came up with a list of what I would say are my suggested changes to that, and then reached out to each individual principal and sort of gave them the opportunity to defend why it wouldn't make sense or why it would make sense to reduce that line. And this is the final list I came up with. What I will say is that any change that was done there, and you'll see behind the sheet that you have in front of you, there should be another one that lists out those 65,000.
Yeah.
Each one of those changes was done in collaboration with the building principal on that, so nothing was sort of done in a vacuum. This was a collaborative effort in getting there. The next decrease was an ML contractual decrease. This was really, we got a quote in that happened to be a little bit less for this coming year, so that's a result of just getting a more adequate number in place. I think it was about $500 cheaper. We did have a few budget increases in getting here, due largely to contractual things that had not previously been in the FY26 budget. The first one on this list is there's 10 chairpersons that get stipends. Those stipends are $3,500 for 10 chairs. So that totals $35,000. The next one would be Unit B merit increases by contract. They are able to receive a merit-based increase, which had not previously been included. The next one is central office accounts payable, getting a $1,000 stipend for being a central office employee. The next one are the trolley tours. So around this time every year, you probably see it, the tours that we do for the trolley. This was added to properly budget for the historical trolley tours for the students. The next one is a stipend for a PE teacher for the department head. Again, it's a contractual one that was previously not falling into the FY26 budget. And the last one on the list there is an increase in the legal line. This was done, remember, or in part by repurposing that $5,000 for the contingency loss. With current contracts expiring at the end of FY26, we will be heading into negotiations soon. So that's one of the driving forces there.
So you want to jump in, Maureen?
Go ahead.
May I clarify?
Ms. Ryan. Dr. Ryan.
Thank you. Just a couple of these things I just want to point out, or what we previously, sometimes we call them budget orphans. So for example, the chairperson stipends have been in place for a long, long time. It's just that they never actually had a specific home in the budget. So some of what you're seeing, it isn't necessarily a new item. It's that as we have continuously made the budget, precise, these are things that have been picked up.
The trolley tours. We pay for them every year.
Right.
This is giving it
them a home.
This is giving it a home, yeah.
Just giving them a home.
And this is team chairs, correct?
Yes, those are the team chairs.
I thought I was getting $3,500.
They work. They work additional days before the school year starts and after the school year ends, but historically they have for many, many years, and it's contractual. The other item that I just wanted to comment on, Mr. Lipset, you asked about the preschool and the revolving account. So Alex and I have talked, and I do think the revolving account will be sufficient for those salaries for one more year. One of the things that I didn't mention previously when I spoke about the early childhood program and the preschool students is that the only revenue that comes in is in fact the paying peers. Those are the numbers that we are struggling most with. We cannot legally charge special education students. And so the revenue of paying peers is not, it's not growing. We are having challenges with bringing in paying peers. And so, yes, we will be able to cover those for next year, but I do think this is likely the last year that account will be able to handle those salaries because the revenue just is not increasing.
If I could just ask a follow-up question.
Of course you can, Mr. Lipset.
Is that a concern for you in any way that that next year we would not be able to cover those salaries? And is it possible to cover some but not all? And would that change any of the calculus?
I believe we will be fine for next year with those there, but I just wanted to be very transparent that I have very little confidence that we will, beyond this next year, be able to carry those salaries there.
They'll be moving into
They will need to move into the operating.
That was my next question, just to make sure that everyone's clear. That doesn't mean that any of these salaries would go away.
No, they will be coming into the
FY27 will be
They
coming
will
out.
absolutely be
Yep.
moving into the operating budget. It could be that a year from now, we realize we're able to keep one of them in the
Or a
prepaid
partial.
account. Right. But I just want to make sure that people understand, those positions will stay in place, but you will very likely see them move into the operating budget. We had hoped to do it this year, and we will be okay for one more year.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lipset. Yes, Dr. Crowley.
Just to actually follow up, these changes were done collaboratively, but this is still very much a draft. And so I know that we're not voting tonight per se, but, the preschool revolving as an example, for the amount of $220,000, when you're looking at 8.46, how can we drop that percentage? This was a way to look at that, and so again, we're taking a stab at a lot of these things, but your feedback would be welcome. So anyway,
I appreciate that.
Madam Chair, may I offer one
Yes,
more
you can,
comment?
Dr. Ryan, thank you.
I do like to remind people, and I know I've said this before, I said it at the subcommittee meeting, that with respect to the special education budget, this is under the assumption that the federal grants stay in place. And that's very important for people to understand. We will be looking at a very different picture if those grants are not maintained.
Across more than just special education.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan.
So can I just?
Yes, you
Sorry.
can, Dr. Crowley.
I was going to wait, but I don't want to, spoiler alert. People are now calling Maureen Ryan, Miss Ryan, Dr. Ryan. She successfully defended her dissertation, and so I just want to honor that, and so that's hence the title change to Dr. Ryan.
Yay. Congratulations. Good job.
Yeah. Congratulations, Dr. Ryan.
Yeah.
I did want to kind of pause there. I know I went through 26 different lines there kind of quickly, so please, if there are any questions.
Yes,
If I could just
Mr.
ask one. On the middle school after-school line, that cost, so the reduction there is to basically install no change to middle school after-school activities. We currently, students have to pay for those activities. If we had kept this in, they would not have to pay. After-school activities at other schools, is there a student fee?
So at the high school, there's no student fee.
Okay.
And at the elementary schools, it varies what program the students attend.
Okay.
The middle schools, the intent, it's been a multi-year ask is to try to build out some extracurricular programming at the middle schools. And as we face budget constraints, it's always an ask. The middle school principals are great about asking for this, but they also manage to run things in a self-sustaining way. There's a cooking class that happens here at the Joyce. The Kennedy does different activities, and it's typically 6 weeks, so it's not a full, semester, or full, not as long. But yeah, that's the middle school.
Are there allowances for students who might have trouble
Yes.
making those payments? Okay.
Yeah. So again, the schools are really dialed into supporting any student to be able to participate.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the committee to just sort of put a mental pin in this one as something I might try to claw back when it comes time to do so. But
So noted.
no movement.
Thank you, Mr. Lipset. Okay. Mr. Mulrennan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could, it's just, again, Alex, thank you for this update, and I want to recognize Mr. Viola, the councilman that's here tonight again with us. We haven't got a number from the mayor. This is just an instructional step by Mr. Dizio to, kind of find some things and clean things up a little bit. So, we're doing the best we can. His department's been going through the years' worth, not just, last year was this, we'll just throw that in there. So he's been really digging deep, really trying to find some, corrections and clarifications in here, so we're not going down looking for a lot of money at the city council level. But I think that his efforts, it looks great. It's just kind of like the needs and the wants again, and it's cleaning it up is where we're at tonight. So I appreciate, the line items and the reductions and the explanation tonight, and appreciate the hard work of that department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mulrennan. And thank you, Mr. Viola. I forgot to recognize you earlier. Nice to see you. Okay, any further questions on the budget as it stands? What are the next step?
Well, he's got
He's a presentation.
more presentation to go.
Unfortunately, I still have some more.
Mr. Dizio, you worked so hard on this. I apologize.
No, that's
Please
fine.
continue.
So one of the questions that came up in subcommittee was, as a result of these budget changes, as a result of these budget changes, how does that impact these roll forward numbers that we've been talking about? So as a result of the changes that we just discussed, And again, remember that these represent the year-over-year increase. So this is saying that 5.6% is the number it takes to roll forward salaries only and to level fund everything else within the budget. And then the 6.9% number is the number it would take to roll forward salaries along with out-of-district tuitions, transportation, and utilities. So anything above that, which is the 7.65%, that delta is the additional for this budget. One common ask that I have, and I actually go back to October, November, when I sort of went through to every building and asked every principal, like, what are your upcoming asks going to be for the year? And the number one thing I heard was to maintain staffing levels. If nothing else, maintain staffing levels. And I especially know at the elementary level, there was the reading specialist was a big one. And I think sometimes lost in all of the numbers and spreadsheets is why we do what we do here. And that's the kids and, our wonderful staff that we have here. So I think it was important to incorporate some of the pictures of our kids learning and our, teachers and staff and paras and interventionists teaching the kids and, just how happy the kids are in these pictures and learning. So I have made it a point to sort of incorporate that in the budget slide deck. So that being said, the updated FY26 proposed amount is $97,275,867, representing a year-over-year increase of 7.65%. I will touch briefly on the budget drivers. They haven't changed too much. The overall increase year-over-year is $6.9 million. You'll recall that the general ed transportation bid came in favorably and that we see a decrease there of $200,000 for that line item. We were also able to repurpose some of the curriculum department decreases and use that to fund additional interventionists. The biggest driver, salary increases. We do see a 3% increase this year, coupled with the steps and longevity, and that accounts for about 60% of that increase. The July 1 ads, we've spoken about this before, these are necessary positions added during the year based on enrollment or required services such as IEP services. For this year, it includes a science and math teacher, a district data and accountability manager, which was grant funded in 25, but a portion of that needs to come back in 26. We restored from prior years a calendar year admin assistant and special ed additions based on enrollment and IEP services include a BCBA, 2 paras, a GAIN teacher, and a reading coach. It's been well documented, the special education increases in transportation, particularly year-over-year increase of $900,000 due largely to NRT vans going up almost 20%. And the other big driver in that department is out-of-district tuitions driven largely by a 9% SEAM increase. So we see an increase of $476,000 on that line. The next big bucket that I'll touch on is the newly arrived grant. And that's due to the offset that was put in the budget last year of $600,000 and the need to bring that back in. The rest of these like little slivers here that don't have numbers associated with them, it's largely building service increases that we touched on, supplies and services. Let's see, sick leave buyback is in there. That's due to the 20 retirements that we have pending. 12 of those are at the elementary level. 2 new lines that came in. One of them is substitutes going up an additional $100,000. That's due in large part to addressing the request for building subs at the elementary level. And I did touch on the increased legal line of $50,000 for the upcoming negotiations. So, again, this chart looks familiar. You'll see that 75% is the current proposed of the current proposed budget is salary driven. 16% of that ends up being other contractual, transportation, utilities, out of district, leaving about 9% for everything else. One thing that I did want to sort of take a little bit more of a deeper dive into, because I think it's important when we say 75% of our budget is salary driven. So what's driving that salary? If you look at this chart, you'll see think it's 5 departments between special education, elementary, and that comprises all 7 elementary schools, the 2 middle schools, the high school. To a lesser degree over here, you'll see multilingual. But if you added all those 5 up, you get to 90% of the total salary line is those 5 departments, and it really makes sense. Those are the sort of student-facing departments. When you think about the people that are working with students on a day-to-day basis, those are the departments and those are the salaries driving this budget. And the last thing that I'll touch on briefly is another way that I looked at this is to look at the job classes that drive the budget. Very similar to the last slide. You'll see that it's the student-facing positions, the teachers, the paras, the nurses, the speech language pathologists, guidance instructional counselors, psychologists. These are just the top 10, but these account for 82% of salaries and overall 62% of the total budget. So I think it was just important to take a deeper dive into that 75% number and show that, of those salaries, it really is the student-facing people, and rightfully so, that are driving this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Dizio. Okay, so Mr. Dizio is now done with the presentation. So do we have any questions for Mr. Dizio on the budget? This is an excellent presentation, Mr. Dizio. Thank you very much. Very informative. I think we asked our questions during the presentation, but my only question, just as the chair, is what is our next step? And in terms of budget development, is it going? It's going back to finance, or is it shaping up to be a good final work product at this point? Dr. Crowley.
1 minute.
Yes, that would be nice.
So I'd like to consider this a draft budget still. I think there's
Yeah, of
conversations
course.
that need to be had. I
Sure.
don't think this is a final work product to
Okay.
as actionable. I think we need to continue working with other building-based leadership department heads to see if there's any other tweaks that need to get made. I think we're close, but I don't
Okay.
think we're there. And so, and then we can either go to
Right.
finance or go through
Sure.
to the school committee.
Okay, just let us know. I mean, it's still March, so it's still very early in the process. So just let me know when I should put it on for further discussion. Thank you. Mr. Lipset.
Just as a clarification, we generally want to have a public hearing and send a budget down by May 1st.
Yes.
So, just to point out, it is still March. It's almost not March. We will be staring down April vacation as well. So, we don't have maybe quite as much time as it might seem. But, certainly still time to do additional work, make sure we've done our due diligence before putting it to a public hearing. But, we certainly do need to think about when we will schedule a public hearing, probably in that week after April break.
So if I'm looking at the calendar, we probably have a meeting next week.
Yep.
And then we have the 8th and the 23rd?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
So we'd have to have,
Go ahead, Ms. Chisholm.
we
Vice
would
Chair
have to
Chisholm.
vote it by the 23rd so that we can plan on.
Yeah.
So we'd probably bring our final thing to by the 8th, so we can have a finance meeting in between if needed, if not.
We need a vote to release the budget to the public, and then we need a public hearing on it.
Yes.
So we
Right.
need 2 votes.
Mhm.
So I can work with the superintendent on trying to have the public hearing, by obviously May 1st.
I mean, we've done, Alex and crew have done a great job with this, and we've done what the mayor asked us to do, is to actually look at each line and see where we could tweak it, and we have. I just don't know how much lower we can get, because I just think we need to be able to still run a school system, so it's out there. I think this is good.
Yeah. I think excellent work has been done. Thank you,
Yeah.
Ms. Vice Chair Chisholm, for leading us through finance.
Well, my goal was 7.5. We'll see if we can get there.
Okay.
I just want to confirm or clarify, I guess. So I have the school committee meeting for the 30th of April because the 23rd is vacation. So I don't know if that was moved. So I just wanted to make sure that.
I was just looking at a calendar. That isn't
No, it
really a
normally would
calendar.
be the 23rd.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the 30th.
Yeah. I didn't know
Okay.
if that made a difference.
That's close.
Probably does, yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Okay, oh, right, April
Yeah.
vacation, we do not want to have anything
I mean,
there.
I'll be here, but I.
Yeah.
No, that's
could-
fine.
If Just, we could, as we've done in the past, hold a public hearing before a regular school committee meeting. Close
Yes.
the
Then
public
close
hearing.
it.
So the April 30th date could work for that.
It could be our public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, stay tuned on that. Okay. Moving on, so the superintendent gave us his recommendation with regards to the MSBA. I feel like that issue has been resolved. Members, I'm going to ask you to, if someone would make a motion to table the correspondence, because the emails that I have weren't fully condensed into the work product that I was hoping to have to go over the correspondence. So if we could, and plus, members of the full committee should be here to hear the correspondence.
I will make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. Thank you, members. I think we've talked about future agenda items. The most important one is going to be the vote on option 1 or option 2 sometime in very early April. We will be releasing that date very soon and posting that meeting. But right now, we preliminarily talked about April 1st. But I do want to speak to members that weren't able to be here tonight and get that out in the public. And then we also talked about the other big apple, which was the budget. The next time we will be discussing that will probably be April 8th. Okay. And if you have any other agenda items that you would like the committee to consider, please email me. And I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.